Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working on this portrait of my cat, River, that I had started working on, and we're just going to go over what I'm doing as I'm doing it, kind of point out some things to you. Basically, the technique that I'm using here that works really well that I want to tell you about is the fact that if you have any areas that you want to stay white or to have a tint to, if you will take your white colored pencil such as your Faber Castell, your Derwent or Caran d'Ache, whatever white you have, go in and just put the light areas down with the white before that you want to stay white or that you want to just kind of have a tint, so that you don't want the color to stick to it completely when you're blending it out. If you'll just use that white and go in there and put those areas in beforehand, when you go after you put your colors in on there and then you go to blend them, the OMS or the thinner that you're using, when you're blending that out, it's going to put a thin layer of color out over that white area. And due to the fact that you've got that white down, when you're blending it, it's not going to stick to those areas as you're blending it, so you'll still have those white areas. And then what I do later on to even bring those areas out even more and to do the highlights, I use my Tombow mono eraser then to go back in over them to bring them out and brighten them up even more, and highlights and for the whiskers and other areas where I need the white to be very, very brilliant and to really highlight it. Okay, and what I did is, again, as I was saying a while ago, I went in with the white, and then after I put the white down, I went in with the burnt sienna, and I put the burnt sienna down, as well as some ochre, burnt ochre, for the light skin tone on the inside of his ears, because his ears weren't just the white, were white, because as you know, there's skin underneath all that fur, and it kind of has a kind of brownish pinkish tone to it. And so what I used for that was I used my burnt ochre and my burnt sienna, and I went in and I put that in, and then as you can see there, as I'm blending that out with my OMS, the areas where I went in and put the white down beforehand, you can see those bits of fur showing through the color where I didn't want it the color to stick. I wanted it to look like fur and like white streaks of fur sticking out in his ear. And you can kind of see how they've kind of got just a little bit of a pinkish tint to those. And then what I'll do is when I want to put more highlights on them or brighten them up even more, I will go back with my Tombow mono eraser over those to bring them out even more. Now what I'm doing is I was using that my black colored pencil to go around the edges of the ear and define those edges of the ear. And you don't want to just do like an outline. You want to do like little slashes or dashes, or just little lines, like little streaks of fur along the edges of the ear, because you want it to look like fur. You don't want it to look like an outline. And so then what I did is I went in and I put in those light areas, and then I went back with my black and my darker brown, the burnt sienna, and I just kind of darkened up those areas where I need those shadows in at, where the ear kind of folds over and has kind of a shadow under there. And then I went back with the white and just put highlights around the edges of the ear where the light fur was showing through even more, as well as highlighting on those ears. And then just going again doing that technique I was talking about earlier, where I use that white pencil and going in the areas where I want the areas to stay white. I don't want any color in that area. Now I'm just using that light gray pencil. I believe the color is just called gray, and using that to put in some little shadows in And I'm not just picking and choosing. I am looking, you'll see me pause every once in a while before switching and continuing on with an area. I'm continuing to look at my reference photo and look at where I need to put the darks, the lights, and making sure I'm getting these colors in the areas where I'm seeing them in my reference photo. And it doesn't have to be exact. With something like this with a lot of detail, it can be very forgiving. So if you have a patch of fur, a dark fur somewhere in your reference photo that you miss, or you don't get it in there, nobody's going to know. It's not going to make a difference in the piece. Only you will know, oh, well, there was supposed to be, a little patch of dark fur here that I didn't get put in. No one else will know that it needed to be there. So this pieces with a lot of detail, you may think, oh, well, this piece is too difficult, there's too much detail in it. But pieces with a lot of detail are they're a lot easier to do because they're very forgiving if you miss something or don't have something exactly right, or a patch of fur is missing somewhere, because it's not going to make a big difference in the piece. It just needs to be as close as possible. And there you see I'm using my light green and my cadmium yellow, and I'm just going in and putting those in. I also put a little bit of that burnt ochre in there because he had just a little hint of that pinkish ochre color in his eyes. And I used the light green and the cadmium yellow because his eyes had a greenish, yellowish tint to them. And so when you're doing things, when you look at it, you're going to say, oh, well, his eyes are green, or with a little bit of a yellow around the pupil or whatever. But if you really take the picture and you zoom in on a particular spot, you will begin to see a lot more colors than just the prominent ones you see when you're zoomed out. So you really want to zoom in on those pieces and look at the color, all the many colors, and you want to get all those colors in where they're at. That gives your piece a lot more depth, a lot more realistic look to it, and it really makes it look more realistic and gives it the piece a lot more depth and contrast. Again, going in with that black, putting in shadows behind some of the pieces in his ear, putting down some of the stripes on his head and getting some of the shadows in there for some of the fur on his head. Again, going in with that black, putting in just some of those streaks of black that were on his head. And again, you don't want to do this like in a coloring pattern or a zigzag line. You want to do this in little strokes, almost like a brush, but with a pen, with your colored pencil, because you want it to go in the same direction that the fur is going. You don't want it to have a bunch of little lines all over the place that makes it look like a cartoon and takes away from the realism. So you just want to make those little lines, those little pieces of fur going in the same direction. Again, looking at my reference photo, and I saw that there was some light brown patches around his eyes, going in and putting those in, switching back to my black again, going in to put these streaks, little patches of black fur that were around his nose, hyping up some of the areas that I needed to go back and brighten up and improve the contrast on after blending them out. And putting in his nose and his mouth here. And you can kind of see on his whiskers there, I've kind of got a little black outline because underneath the whisker, to show the highlight of the whisker, where I had gone in earlier and drawn those whiskers in with my white pencil again to keep them from getting washed out by all the other colors. Again, just continuing to go in with that black pencil and put in those streaks of fur that were there. Going around his ear now and his eye. Continuing to, and you always need to have a reference photo. Don't ever try to do something by memory or by what you think it looks like, because your mind will try to tell you, oh, well, I know what he looks like. This is what it looks like. And then when you try to do it, it's not going to look right, because your mind wants to tell you how one thing looks when that's not really what it looks like. So you always want to have a reference photo to go by. Again, continuing to look at that reference photo, look where I need to put my shadows, where I need to put my highlights, where the darks are, the lights are, making sure I'm getting everything dark enough, putting those lights in there, blending them out with my own mess, and then going in and after it dries, hyping them up again. You don't ever want to just leave something after you've blended it. You're going to need to go back in again and hype up those details, bring them out, with your pencil again. You may even need to add some more detail as they get blended. And as you can see here, as I'm blending the fur around his face, you can see how it's blending that out, making it look furry, but it looks kind of all running together. So what I'll do is I will take those colored pencils, I'll take my black and my browns, and I will go back in over those areas and just put some little streaks. Now going in with the white, putting in the white areas again now to keep them from getting filled in with color, so that I can go in and put that contrast, those highlights and those little streaks of white whiskers that are coming in off of his eyes and his face. And then the streaks of white that were inside his ears. Okay, now going in with that burnt ochre and that burnt sienna, putting in those pink tones in for his ears. With that burnt sienna. I also used the gray again in some areas where I needed some shadow, but I didn't want the shadows really dark. I'm blending that ear out, and you can see where I went in and put in that white beforehand, where it's really giving the highlighted areas where you could kind of see the skin tones showing through. Again, putting in, like I said, going back over all the areas after they've dried from the OMS, hyping them up, bringing them out some more. Again, just continuing to look at my reference photo, stop and step back for a minute and look at my image, look and see where I need to improve something, I need to hype something up or bring it out more, add some more detail to it. Just continuing to stop and look at it. And here is the finished piece and what it looked like once it was completed. I hope you enjoyed this video and picked up some things and learned some things with me as we went along on this portrait of my cat. I hope to see you in the next video. Please be sure to click that like button and be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any videos coming up in the future.